Greetings, children of the screen, your friendly neighborhood nerd scum here, and I'm joined by...
Hey guys, I'm Vic.
And welcome to another edition of What You Mean You Ain't Seen. Vic, what you mean you ain't seen The Crow?
I just haven't.
The fuck, dude?
You look so offended.
Do you even know me? I don't think you even know me. The Crow, originally released in 1994, rated R, coming in at 102 minutes. Directed by Alex Proyas, and based on a comic book by James O'Barr. With a screenplay written by David J. Schow and John Shirley. With a cast that includes Brandon Lee, Ernie Hudson, Michael Wincott, Bai Ling, David Patrick Kelly, Angela David, Lawrence Mason, Michael Mattey, Tony Todd, and John Polito. As well as a wide assortment of other extremely talented motherfuckers. So Vic, I know you've heard plenty of things about the Crow franchise, never seen one before until now. General thoughts, what'd you think?
Honestly, the story was really interesting, and they kept you, like, on the edge of your seat, kind of. Like, oh my god, what the fuck's this guy gonna do next?
Right.
And, I don't know, it was a really fun ride. It was really fucked up, but really fun.
Yeah, fuck
I
yeah.
enjoyed it.
Fuck yeah. It's fun, and it's enjoyable. Those are my general thoughts, too. Let's go ahead and move on to the next section, because it's awesome, and I can't wait to talk about this fucking movie. The Crow!
Tell them Eric Draven sends his regards.
Walk out of here. They're gonna erase your sorry ass. You're nothing but street grease, Eric. Street grease, you motherfucker.
Is that gasoline I smell?
No, man. No! No!
Okay, Vic. What was your favorite thing out of The Crow?
My favorite thing was actually the script that they had for the movie.
Like the writing in general?
Yeah, the writing in general, because, like, all the lines that they had were really, like, witty.
The dialogue is
but
really
it wasn't
good.
like, oh, characters wouldn't be saying that in, like, this amount of... It was very believable for, like, the characters that they had, but also really witty. And kind of poetic in some places.
Yeah, a lot of Eric's dialogue is taken directly from the comic, from different things that... And also there is actually a lot of, like, literary things put into different character dialogue. Like the thing that... T-Bird says, like, the book he's reading from during the flashback sequences is actually Paradise Lost by Milton.
Abashed, the devil stood and felt how awful goodness is. Saw virtue in her shape, how lovely. It's pornography. Does it get you sweating? Abashed, the devil stood. I felt how awful goodness is. I felt how awful goodness is.
Like, there's a lot of literary elements put into the movie, and the writing is fantastic. Whenever I was learning screencraft, it was always described to me that the writer's job is not to craft a realistic world that the audience can believe in, but to craft the ideal world for that story to exist in. And this script does that perfectly. The dialogue, while like you said, it's not realistic to the way people really talk, but it does feel organic and real to this world and to the story that we're seeing and to these individual characters. And, like, beyond just the dialogue, all the characters are very individual. Like, none of them blend together. They're all very distinct, even characters that we don't get a lot of time with, like Skank.
Yeah.
And you can see that not only in, like, all the other levels, but even in the writing of the story, like, Skank has a lot of different things going on. When you see him in the flashbacks, he's very clearly a different character than he is when we see him in the present. Like, the life of crime has not suited him very well, essentially.
That's for sure.
And again, I feel that, like, a lot of the elements that this uses to tie together, like, a traditional, straightforward kind of revenge film with like the gothic, romantic horror aspects of it, and then like the kind of super like in your face 80s and 90s like goth punk metal feel. Like all that stuff is balanced very, very well in the script, and then it like just flows out from the rest of it into every other facet of the film. So yeah, far more so than any other film in this franchise. The writing on this one is very, very good, and it's worth mentioning that they did change quite a lot from the original source material. Like, The Crow, as it exists in the graphic novel form, is not something you would look at and just be like, oh, well, we can just literally translate this page to page to page and create it into a movie. Like, there's definitely work. You have to go into the material and, like, reshape it in order to get, like, a Hollywood-esque film that, like, the average moviegoer can ingest. And, they did a lot of tweaking, but it all manages to capture like the essence of the graphic novel while still doing its own thing and giving you a movie that is watchable and engaging and works on a multitude of levels in terms of narrative. Because you have like the main revenge story, but if you look closer, there's lots of little pieces and evidence that are hidden in the script and in the story as to like things about other characters, like, you know, about the cop Albrecht and his life, and then also like the underlying story of like the real estate scheme, where they're like, yeah, there's a real estate scheme that's at the core behind all of this, but we're not going to tell you about that because real estate schemes are fucking boring. Instead, we're just going to tell you the revenge story. So yeah, the writing's got a lot going on, and it's a very, very strong point. Yeah, so good one, good pick.
Yay.
Take your shot, fun boy. You got me, dead bang.
You seriously fucked up. But you look in the mirror. I mean, you need professional help.
Bingo! He shot! He scored!
Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christ. Stop me if you heard this one.
Jesus Christ walks into a hotel. Ow. He hands the innkeeper 3 nails and he asks, don't you ever fucking die? You put me up for the night?
So as for me, it's hard for me to pick, obviously, because this is a movie that I absolutely love. It's hard for me to pick, but I love the cast in this movie. The cast in this movie is killer. It's just like full of these great little character actors who like most people won't know their names or remember them like in terms of who they are as a professional, but like in terms of certain characters. Like there's almost nobody in this movie who we haven't seen somewhere else in a movie before. Michael Wincott, who plays the like big villain Top Dollar, is just absolutely fantastic, and I love him in everything he's in, whether it's like the assassination of Jesse James or it's Strange Days, which we watched here recently, where he is just like, he's such a fun, versatile actor, and that voice of his is just gold. There's no wrong you can do with that voice. Like, the dude who plays Gideon, the pawn shop owner, I've seen him in a bunch of movies where most of the time it's just like these little bit parts that he has here and there, but every time he does one, he manages to bring something cool and interesting and fun to it. And especially once you get this far into his career, where he's been a character actor for a while and he's very comfortable with it, like, in this movie, he's just, like, chewing the scenery left and right. It's so fucking great. All the guys who play the gang members, whether it's, like, Michael Massey or, like, any of them, like, all of them bring something unique and different and memorable to those characters, so that we really don't need to spend a lot of time with them to get them 100%. They leave a very indelible mark on the viewer as they're watching it, and also, like, you can have fun while watching them, but also at no point do you question the validity of Eric's actions against them. You can see them for the people they are, like damaged and flawed, and like find some entertainment in them, and even maybe in some ways empathize with certain aspects of their experience, but you never side with them, and you never feel bad for them. Even Skank, who is like the most pathetic, like strung out little cockroach of a man, no matter how pathetic they make him, you never feel bad for him in this movie.
I want all of you boys to be able to look me straight in the eye one more time and say, "Are we having fun or what?" Hey, you! Huh? What's your name? Skank? You don't feel that?
I feel like a little worm on a big fucking hook. I feel like a little worm on a big fucking hook.
Well, boy, your mama must be damn proud of you.
I'm sorry, I almost missed Tony Todd, Candyman. Candyman, Tony Todd's just the fucking bomb. Like, he's been in Star Trek. He's like one of those guys like Jeffrey Combs. He's been in everything. He's Tony Todd. That's all I have to say. He's so amazing, and again, they got him for like this one role, and every line he has, his voice is just like silk with like a nice fine brandy poured over it, with like a fucking Cuban cigar smoke blown over it. It's just like cool. Everything about it's cool. Yeah, and then we got Ernie Hudson as like the good cop Albrecht, who like, again, half his lines are so comedic, and you could have any other actor playing it and he would probably just play it in ways of like a dude who's got an attitude, but like the way he plays Albrecht is so even, and like he's so a guy who's dealing with problems in stride. Like, he's seen the bad shit and knows that this is his normal day-to-day stuff is just shit. And like, so he takes it in stride, and he tends to like have a pretty good laid-back sense of humor about everything, which creates a really nice kind of juxtaposition to everything else in the movie. And his kind of lighthearted humor definitely helps like break up some tenser stretches of the film, or some more emotional stretches of the film. Particularly, I love his scene where like his captain is just like chewing him out, and then at the end of it, he's just like, "That was a good speech, sir. I didn't want to interrupt you. That's good shit. You got to write this shit down." Like, I love that. So I'm going to use that sound clip probably 3 or 4 times in the course of this video.
Oh my God.
Somehow. Right now. Put it in there.
Good speech, sir. I didn't want to interrupt you. It sounded good. You got to write this shit down. All right, smart ass.
And of course, finally, like, obviously there's some other great supporting people, but we need to be moving on. So, like, Brandon Lee in this movie as Eric is phenomenal. Like, he was an amazing martial artist and was really just coming into his own as an actor. And there are moments in this movie that suffer from him having already been passed. So he could not, like, you know, either be in the scene, or they had to dub his voice with another actor. And some of those moments are very noticeable. But for the most part, the stuff visually where he's not in the movie is stuff that they managed to hide very well with some very artistic shot choices and like some very early CGI and some matte painting and stuff like that. It's mostly the voice dubs that get a little rough in places, but even with that stuff, like, he gives one fucking killer performance, and it is haunting and funny and like everything that the character in the comic book is and should be, but more relatable. Like, whereas it's very, you can definitely you can sympathize with the character in the book, but you can't empathize with him. You can't ever really put yourself in his headspace, and this version of the character you definitely can. So yeah, all in all, the cast is what makes this movie, because even with great production design, great scripting, if you had a cast that couldn't pull like half their weight, like, this movie would fall apart.
It poses some really interesting questions. If you died, and then somehow a year later, you had 1 day, 2 days to come back, what would you do? The whole concept of having come back from the dead in the first place to deal with, it's a very interesting character for me. If someone were to step in and analyze this guy at a certain point in the film, I'm not sure he's always entirely sane, you know? I mean, he's going through some pretty wild shit.
So now that I'm done babbling on incessantly for about 20 minutes that I probably had to cut out of this damn video, what, if anything, because I know it's going to be hard to pick, because as we already said, this is a really cool movie, what didn't really work for you in it? what was your least favorite thing out of The Crow?
It actually wasn't that hard for me.
Oh.
Yeah. Fucking hated everything. No, I'm kidding. I mostly just didn't like the lack of surprise and shock that people had whenever, you know, Eric showed up. They're like, oh, weren't you dead? And he was like, I don't even know what I am. They're like, okay, cool.
Like, really the only character who really seems to, like, handle it with, like, out being phased is Top Dollar. Like, most of the other characters on some level, like, most of them are, like, it's a measured response. Like, the cop deals with it relatively well. But, like, he deals with everything relatively well in that same way. What I found interesting about him is, like, there's, in the scene with him and Eric in the house, there's, like, a few seconds where you see him start to freak the fuck out when he's like, you're a ghost or something, and then Eric's like, boo, I don't know what I am. And then, like, you can see him, like, again, Ernie Hudson's an amazing actor, so you can see him playing the moment of this guy, of all of a sudden the reality of it hitting him, and him starting to fall apart, and then him being like, no, get your shit together. And it's just a little moment, but it works for me. Like, it sells that idea of a cop who's seen a lot of shit, who knows how to compartmentalize, but for just a second, the reality of the situation has hit him. And again, like, I feel like with the villainous characters, like, really the first one who really recognizes him is T-Bird. And when T-Bird in the car recognizes him, he flips the fuck out. Like, he goes back into almost like a weird childlike state where he's like, this is the really real world, man. Like,
you don't come back.
Like, he just can't handle it. He's in total denial. So I will say that, like, the movie put far less emphasis on the idea of, like, people's reaction to him being back. But at the same time, like, most of the characters in the movie aren't characters who are personally related or, like, tied to him as a character. I don't think that Tintin, like, despite the fact that he's, like, talk shit about Shelley, I don't think he remembers Eric and Shelley. Like, I don't think he remembers them at all. I think that's actually the idea, is he's just saying that stuff to fuck with him. I don't think he actually remembers her at all. And similarly with, like, you know, Funboy. I don't think Funboy, since the night that happened, I don't think he's had a second thought about it. And then Skank automatically accepts that it is him back from the dead, because clearly, as I've said, when you look at Skank in those flashbacks, he's a very different character. He's very well put together. He's also probably one of the newer guys in the gang. He's definitely one of the younger people in the gang. And I imagine that, like, things have not been kind to him. And, like, when I watch it, I kind of take the idea that, like, when they went there, they didn't realize that that's what was going to happen. And it went way further, and I think that fucked with him hardcore and has, like, changed him. So I think that's why he's, like, he's freaking out about it, but not about the fact that it's someone back from the dead. It's just the fact that his number's up, because he's probably been waiting for this to happen. Like, he's been waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like, he's been slowly destroying himself ever since that happened.
That's him. That's him. But he was different. He was all painted up white like some kind of dead whore. I seen him. T-Bird, he sent me in for some road beers, right? And he took him away when I chased him down. And he flashed right T-Bird to his fucking car. Oh, T-Bird. Here's to you, buddy.
Maybe we ought to just videotape this, play it back in slow motion.
Fire up. Fire up. Fire up.
3 out of 4. He's working his way back to this speed freak right here.
It's not fair. Funboy's fault. That boy was out of control. T-Bird, he came in here, weighs them both, and now this goat gonna kill my ass next.
On one hand, the movie doesn't put a lot of emphasis on it, but I don't really think that, like, the situations are set up for those kind of moments. Like, in subsequent movies, they will play on that trope a lot more, of the, like, big reveal of, like, you're that person who I did this thing to! So yeah, I will say that, like, while it is valid to say that they didn't put very much emphasis on it, I think they were more concerned with other aspects, and I don't think that the situations that they wrote into the movie were that focused on that. They were more concerned with, like, solid storytelling as opposed to, like, those kind of, like, moments. They weren't trying to play for, like, the cheap shots on the emotional. Like, they knew that they had all the emotional beats where it mattered, and they played to their strengths in those without having to, like, play on the tropes of the typical kind of revenge movie thing. They had their own tropes they could play with.
Suddenly, I heard a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door.
What are you talking about? You're trespassing. And you owe me a fucking new door.
I'm looking for something in an engagement ring. Gold.
You're looking for a coroner. Shit for brains. Oh, shit. Oh, shit on me. Shit on me. Shit on me!
Mr. Gideon, you're not paying attention.
And as for me, my least favorite thing in the film is something that, especially for you as like a first-time viewer who doesn't really have any like greater knowledge into the franchise, like I'm sure it doesn't seem like a problem at all, but in a movie, you have to at least like superficially believe that your hero's not going to make it at the end, or that like they might not succeed in their overall goal. So in this movie, they have to incorporate this idea that because the bird is the link between the land of the living and the land of the dead, that if you hurt or kill the bird, that you sever that link and you take away the power from the person. And on one hand, I don't really care for it because that's not in the book. It's not in the comic. It doesn't come from the comic. Like in the comic, he's just like an undead zombie who fucking kills everybody and then dies and goes to be with his love forever. But there's no real opposition to him. Nothing that he comes up against slows him down or like really is a problem, and that's not a very interesting movie. So I understand their need to come up with it. My other issue is that like it's kind of vague, which would be fine if it were only this movie. But because there are 4 movies in this franchise, and because other comic books and movies started using it afterwards, like once you start pulling the threads on that logic of like, well, hold on. If you wound the bird, he loses his power. But why? The bird's still alive. The bird still has its power. Well, then it should be like, okay, well, if you kill the bird completely, then he loses his power. But that's not what happens in this movie, even though that's implied in a later movie. Even though, no, if the bird is his tether between the land of the living and the land of the dead, then theoretically, if the bird died, then his soul should be out of the body altogether. He shouldn't be back to being a mortal man. That doesn't make any fucking sense. So you see what I mean? Like, it's a thing where, like, in the movie, for the purpose it serves, and as little bit as they use it, the device works fine. But as you move forward, it's not something that should be continued to be incorporated into the lore, and I would not have a problem with it if, again, it hadn't started showing up in other comic books of The Crow and other novels of The Crow. It's a good, quick fix for what they needed to do for this movie in order to, like, get a studio to sign off on it, to give it the idea and the feel of, like, a cinematic story arc. But there are other things that they could have done. So, like, if they ever do end up rebooting this franchise, that's something that I really hope they remove. Every level, there's attention paid. The cinematography is beautiful. The casting's beautiful. The set design is beautiful. Like, the wardrobing's beautiful. Everything is so meticulously handled. And the story is so well written. And the characters are so well developed. But you just have this one third act problem. Like every goddamn Marvel movie. Everything's perfect except in the third act. You have this one thing that's just like, well, it doesn't make any goddamn sense, but we don't have a movie without it.
They should have delved deeper into the whole, like, the crow is tethered to the other world. And
Yeah.
Kill it. Like, I feel like if they would have put more thought into it and thought more on the lore of it,
Yes.
they could have made that subject into something better, but they didn't. It seemed like they were short of time or something. Like, just throw it in there for now. It's fine.
Obar signed off on everything for this movie. The creator of the graphic novel, the comic, he signed off on everything. So I imagine they didn't want to spend a lot of time hammering in this thing, whereas, like, in the comic itself, like, nothing's explained. Like, you don't know how the crow brings him back. You don't even see him get resurrected. He's just there with the makeup and everything, just existing as this vengeance beast who's like just sad and angry and going through grief and going to make the whole world suffer for it. In that respect, again, I get it. I get the decision. It doesn't even really bother me in the movie, but if I have to pick like one fatal flaw in the movie, like the one biggest problem the movie has, that is definitely it. Is like all this shit about taking away his power. Like,
Vengeance Beast. That sounds like a band.
Right. Vengeance Beast. Bum, da, da, dum, da, da, dum, da, da, dum. How are
I'd
they not
listen
on
to
the
it.
soundtrack, right?
Right?
Quick impression for you. Caw, bang, fuck, I'm dead.
All right, Vic. The big question. Would you recommend The Crow?
Literally all 2 of my friends are really into dark things, so yeah, definitely.
That's not very enthusiastic.
Yeah, definitely. I love this movie. I'd
Yeah.
recommend it to everybody.
It's the fucking Crow.
Is that more exciting?
Yeah,
for you?
I guess that'll work. It's
Alright,
fine.
good.
It's fine. The ship's already sailed, but whatever.
Oh.
Yeah, no. I also highly recommend it to all the people I know and the people I don't know. Like, yeah, for the time this movie came out, it was very edgy. It is rated R. It's got some stuff that's definitely not suited for children, but if you are an adult and even, like, remotely capable of dealing with, like, emotional stuff, because, again, the movie, by modern-day standards, it's not really exploitative. Even, like, the scenes in which they depict, like, a rape scene are very... I say tastefully done. They're not done from a sexual gaze. They're actually done from the point of view of the person being raped. So it's horrible, and it's not, like, to tantalize you or whatever.
It's
like
to deter you from that. It's like,
Yeah.
see this shit? Bad shit.
It's a fantastic film that, like, has so much care and attention put into it, and as much as, like, the death of Brandon Lee is intrinsic with this movie, a lot of times that's really what people focus on as opposed to the movie. And even after he died, like, the filmmakers went to his wife or fiance and his mother and asked them, like, should we finish the film? And, like, they said, yeah, that's what Brandon would want you to do. So after all this time, like, yeah, I definitely recommend go and watch the film. And while, like, you should always remember Brandon Lee because it was a tragedy what happened to him, and that should not be forgotten, and he was an amazing actor just coming into his prime, look at the movie that they were actually able to make, and, like, look at all the things they had working against them. And at some point, I'll do another video where I go through and actually talk about all the things they had to change in post, like, to make this movie work, and all the little tricks they had to do, because it is well worth your time to just see the, like, honest effort and love and craft that went into this film. It's fucking awesome. Watch it.
Do it.
Right on, children of the screen. Thank you very much for joining us for another edition of What You Mean You Ain't Seen, The Crow.
Later.
Right on, guys, and if you like this video, then please leave a like and share it with some friends. Also, if you're not subscribed, please hit that little bell so you can get updates on all the dope content we'll have coming out in the future. Furthermore, guys, if you'd like to follow either of us on Instagram or Twitter, we will have the link for that in the description below. And one more thing, guys, we are about to be wrapping up this series, What You Mean You Ain't Seen, so down in the description below, I will have a link to the playlist. We're working up to episode 50, where we are going to be covering Cannibal Holocaust. Once again, children of the screen, thank you very much. I hope you all have a good one. Nerd Scum, out. Caw, caw, bang, fuck, I'm dead. Michael Wincott is awesome.
Such a nerd.
Good speech, sir. I didn't want to interrupt you. It sounded good. You gotta write that shit down.